This is Scriptures and Storytimes with Stephanie, and I'd like to focus on Peter today and a little bit of the Passover and a part of during the crucifixion of Jesus. So, Matthew 26, Matthew chapter 26, verse 33 through 35. And then 33, Peter answered and said unto him, Though all men shall be offended because of thee, yet will I never be offended. So Peter's saying to Jesus, like, everybody finds you offensive because you hold them accountable, and I won't find you offensive. Well, I'll never be offended by you. And then 34, Jesus said unto him, Verily I say unto you, that this night before the cock crow, thou shalt deny me thrice. So, in that, Jesus is saying to Peter, that night, that before the crow says, that he'll deny him 3 times. And then in verse 35, it says, Peter said unto him, Though I should die with thee, yet will I not deny thee. Likewise also said all the disciples. So Peter says to Jesus, I should die with you. And he also says, I won't deny you. And then all the disciples were like, yeah, we won't deny you. Anyway, and then Matthew chapter 16, verse 21 to 23. Excuse me. Almost had a baby on, but I'm okay. Anyway, it says in verse 21, it says, From that time forth began Jesus to salute unto his disciples, how that he must go unto Jerusalem and suffer many things of the elders and chief priests and scribes, and be killed and be raised again the 3rd day. Also, just so you know, this is the King James version, because that's the version God told me to read from. So that's what I read from when I read the Bible. But yeah, back to the verse. So Jesus said to the disciples that he has to go to Jerusalem and that he's going to suffer by the elders, the chief priests and scribes, and he's going to die. And then he's going to be raised again on the 3rd day. And then on verse 22, then Peter took him and began to rebuke him, saying, Be it far from thee, Lord, this shall not be unto thee. And then, my thing is, they've been following Jesus this whole time, right? Like, Peter is also the one that walked on water, which I didn't write that verse in here. But everything so far that Jesus has said has come true, and either has come true or is about to come true. And like, to me, that's kind of like when you try to do something to like break a habit, or you do something that is really what God wants you to do. It seems like there's always like one person that's kind of like, maybe you shouldn't do that, or maybe you should think that out more before you try to do that. And it's like, that's kind of who Peter is right now. And in the scripture, he basically is telling Jesus, like, I rebuke you dying. I rebuke everything you said. I want you to be far from it, and this shall not be unto thee. So like, I want that to happen, basically. And then in verse 23, he says, he turned. So Jesus turned to Peter and said to Peter, Get thee behind me, Satan, that art an offense unto me, for thou, excuse me, anyway, it says, he turned and said unto Peter, Get thee behind me, Satan, thou art an offense unto me, for thou savorest not the things that be of God, but thou that be of men. So, it's kind of funny to think that Peter was in front of Jesus. Like, that they were, like, behind, that Jesus turned around and was like, Get thee behind me, Satan. I don't know. It just, to me, it sounds funny. But it's serious, too. But, like, it's, like, imagine Jesus turning around and be like, Get thee behind me, Satan. Like, anyway, and then it'd be like, Thou art an offense unto me. So, like, he's saying, like, that's offensive. Like, don't say that. And then he's like, You savor not the things of God. So it's like saying, like, you don't care about, excuse me, you don't care about what God says. You think about what men want, which I get. Like that's like being like, you don't want your friend to die, I guess, if you consider God his friend. I don't know, but that's a lot. But anyway, Luke 22, this is starting at 54, verse 54. And then they took Jesus, and led him and brought him into the high priest's house, and Peter followed afar off. Like, as many times have I heard about the Passover being preached, it's literally always the same things. But they don't talk about that, like, they took Jesus, they led him away from the disciples, right? They took him to the high priest's house, and then Peter followed from afar. So that means, like, that's like if you had a leader, like, in school, and, like, they're excuse me, hold on. Okay. I took an allergy pill. I apologize. Hasn't hit yet. But if a leader was in the line, so Jesus is going away, and Peter is at the back of the line. It's kind of like when you know somebody, but you don't want people to know that you know them, or that you're, like, associated. So you kind of go, like, a little bit off. I think that's kind of messed up, y'all. Like, that's, oh my goodness. Anyway, verse 55. And when they had kindled a fire in the midst of a hall, and were set down together, Peter sat down among them. But at this moment, I want to also talk about Matthew in this, because if you look at Matthew with this verse of Luke in 22, Peter sat there for a long time. Like, Peter didn't leave. He was there the whole time that they're, like, spitting on Jesus, and they're like hitting him. And it take a long time to build a fire. Like, I watch Survivor a lot. I like Survivor. And the fact that he sat there while they like made a fire. And then people are saying in Luke 22 verse 56, but a certain maid beheld him as he sat by the fire, and earnestly looked upon him, and said, This man was also with him. So she's like, he with Jesus. And then it says 57, and denied him, saying, Woman, I know not him. So he looks at the lady and said, I don't know him. And then 58, verse 58, and after a little while, another saw him and said, Art thou also with them? And Peter said, Man, I am not. So this guy goes up to Peter and is like, don't you know him? Aren't you also with them? And Peter said, man, I am not. And I think it's so crazy too that he said, man, I am not. Like the vocab that he would say to say that, because how everything else is written is not, I feel like it's not as brash. And the fact that he said, man, I am not, I think that's like intense. Anyway, and then it says 59, in about the space of 1 hour, after another confidently affirmed, saying, of this truth, this fellow also was with him, for he is a Galilean. So that means another hour later, another person confidently affirmed, saying of the truth, this fellow, this guy, Peter, he was also with him because he's a Galilean. And then if you look at Matthew 22, verse 69, I didn't say I'm not going to say the whole verse just because, I just think the most important part is somebody also directly called Jesus Jesus of the Galilees. And it's like, so they knew that he was Jesus, and they still were like, that dude with the Galilee, Jesus of Galilee. So I thought that was interesting. And then 60 of Luke 20, chapter 22, verse 60. And then Peter said, ma'am, I know not what thou sayest. And immediately when he spake, the cock crew. And so that's like the last time that he betrays Jesus. And the crow was like, wah, like, the sound he made. And that's crazy. Anyway, and then if you look at Matthew 22, verse 72, he also denied, it says that further explaining that he also denied Jesus with an oath. So that's like being like, with the oath, I do not know the man. So he was like, I promise I don't know him. And during this time, this is also during the time that he's waiting there, watching them, preparing to kill Jesus, and he's denying him the whole time. That's like, man. Anyway, and then again, Luke chapter 22, verse 61. And the Lord turned and looked upon Peter, and they remembered the word of the Lord, how he had said unto him, before the cock crow, thou shalt deny me thrice. Can you imagine that Jesus is getting prepared to like die, and like these people have lit a fire, have literally been like yelling at him, hitting him, palms open. So this part of your hand, that's distracting. This part of your hand, and he looks over at Peter, like, and makes like, and looked at him, like that's like him being like this when people fighting him, and then be like, do you know how terrifying that is, as Peter? But at least to me, I think that'd be terrifying a little bit. But that's so heavy to me, that literally his prophecy is being fulfilled, and you look at the person that like it was about, as like God embodied in Jesus is looking at the person that he had the prophecy about. Like, wow. Okay. And then Luke 22, verse 62. And Peter went out and wept bitterly. So he walked out and cried, mad. Like, he was like, man, like, you know what I mean? Like, when people were like, man, I don't, you know. Anyway, but I also wanted to say Matthew 22, verse 73. They also said, art thou them that they speech betray thee, betrayeth thee. So that means that disciples, they like, they talked a certain way that they could be identified by how they, talked. I think that's, cool too. I like that. So, and then I think another thing too is Matthew 22, chapter 22, verse 74, and then he began to curse and swear, saying, I know not the man. I think the looking at both Luke and Matthew further explains both of those moments where Jesus was crucified. I think there's some other verses too, like some other chapters that mention it, but I haven't read those yet. So I'm only really talking about the chapters that I've read or the verses that I read that I'm like, I wouldn't say confident about, but like I could talk about. But I think it's crazy that he cursed and he made an oath. So he said, I promise, and he got mad, and well, I think he got mad. I don't know. To me, it sounded like he was like, man, I don't even know him. Or like he cursed, so he said like a bad word, and he was like, I don't know him, I swear. Or cursed and to swear. So yeah, he cursed and he swore. So that means he like said a bad word, and he could have been like, I swear, like when people be like, I swear on my mama. Like he could have did that. Like that's, well, maybe not that. I don't know. I wasn't there. But that's like, that's a lot. That's like, oh man. Like this guy cursed and swore and then cried when the prophecy was right. And this ain't even, this is before Jesus is even dead, y'all. Like, that's like intense. Whew. Anyway, hope y'all have a good day. And I hope any of that made sense. And that it somehow brightened your perspective on Peter and the things Peter did.